Hello, everybody. Thank you for stopping by. I am just doing a live event, giving people the chance to talk to me, to kind of interact with me, see what I'm like whenever you get to have a live interaction with me. And for right now, nobody's in the room yet. Usually that's the way these things start out because I don't give a lot of notice. I just decide, oh, I feel like doing a live event today. So then I do it. So nobody has any kind of advance warning. So as people see on the channel that I'm doing a live event, they sort of start filtering in. So right now I'm actually just talking and sort of filling time until people do show up in the room and have questions. But what I really want to do is answer people's questions about psychic stuff, like how did I get started? Do I know some stories of how other people got started? What's really behind it all? How does it really work? How do you know if you're talking to a scammer or to a legitimate psychic? Same types of questions about mediumship because I also am a medium as well. And whatever else you guys want to talk about, doesn't matter to me. We can talk about cornbread recipes or fry bread recipes, whatever. It's all good. This is just your chance to kind of get to know me and interact with me. So that's what this is all about. And so, because I don't like a lot of quiet time just because I'm waiting for people to come into the room, I do have a little bit of a topic here. One of my great passions is to be able to mentor other people who are just discovering their psychic abilities later on in life so that we can they can go forward with those and advance those. I know I was using psychic abilities my whole life, but I never would have called it that. I never knew what they actually were until later on in life. And then when I did start realizing what they were, it didn't take long for me to go, wow, I can't imagine living without using these abilities every day. So I want to really help people open up to using their own abilities every day because it just makes such a big difference in life to be able to kind of have a feeling about what is probably coming down the pike and sort of get a chance to kind of be handling or figuring out how you're going to handle those situations in your head. Um, it's made a tremendous difference for me. And so, because I know it makes such a huge difference, I would really love to help other people get into that position as well. So that's my big passion. That's actually even bigger than doing readings. And for those of you who've had a reading with me or who know me, you know I love to do readings. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is for people who are just starting to get into the spiritual world, whether it's psychic, whether it's mediumship, whatever it is, whether it's astral projection, anytime you start getting into spiritual things, the one thing that you want to keep in mind is that the spiritual world really isn't that much different than the physical world. In the spiritual world, you have entities that are nice guys, and you have entities that are not so nice guys, very much like the physical world. In the physical world, we run into people that have agendas that include being helpful to other people, and we also run into people that have agendas that only include being helpful to themselves, no matter what it costs anybody else. And we've got all kinds of in between. Well, same thing in the spiritual world. We have entities with all kinds of different intentions. So it's really important before you start wandering around on the spiritual side of things that you do some protection, that you put up some self-defense, some psychic self-defense. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. So that's the first thing that as you're wandering into this part of the experience of life here, that you want to do is you want to find a method of putting up a shield or putting on a suit of armor, so to speak, spiritually, that's going to keep you in contact with only those spirits that have your highest and best interest in mind. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. If you Google psychic self-defense, you'll find people have written about these things several different places. You may even come across other YouTube videos about this. Psychic self-defense is just a very basic thing. It's almost like brushing your teeth. It's something that if you're going to be consciously walking on the spiritual side, you definitely want to be consciously doing something to take care of yourself, just like you consciously take care of your teeth every day. So when you start walking on the spiritual side, the first thing that I would recommend is find a way to do your own psychic self-defense and make it your own. Make it something that you're very comfortable with. Make it something that you can do on a daily basis and maybe even more frequently. Just something that you can think about and you can run through it and do it very quickly. You don't want this to be a long, drawn out process where you have to sit and meditate for 20 minutes to put on your psychic armor. Because you want to be able to put it on at an instant's notice. If you find yourself in a situation at work where you're surrounded by a lot of negative energy, you want to be able to just take a couple of seconds, kind of just mentally just go through and put that armor on and be ready to handle things, you know. So, um, I guess to get started, I should tell you that the best way to do psychic self-defense that I have found, and everything, you know, we all work differently, so different things work for different people. But the best one that I have found, I actually run through in the Meet Amista one video. Towards the end of that, probably the last 10 minutes of that, I actually walk everybody that was there through a meditation slash visualization that I use. So that might be like a good first place to start when you're starting to work on psychic self-defense is there, and kind of check that out. And then look at some other ideas that other people are doing. Find something that works for you. The most important part of psychic self-defense is that it's comfortable and that it works for you. Okay, so we have a whole whopping one person in the room right now. I know if I would schedule these ahead of time, I wouldn't have to wait for people to show up in the room. But you can feel free to ask whatever question that you would like to. This is all about just interacting with me. You can find out about things that you're normally not going to find out on the videos that I put out here. This is just a chance to ask questions about things that maybe you want to know about that you don't get a chance to otherwise. And I'm happy to be here and happy to talk to everybody. Happy to talk about, you know, if you're going through some psychic things, if you're going through a psychic growth spurt and some things are happening that you don't understand, I'm happy to talk about those and we can sort of put our heads together and figure out what's going on in that situation, if that's helpful for you. If you just have questions about how psychic things work in general, I'm happy to answer questions like that. You know, if you just have comments, I'm open to hearing comments, whatever. We can talk about cornbread or pancake recipes. We can talk about anything, but basically this is your chance to kind of get to know a little bit more about who I am and how I operate. It gives you a chance to decide, you know, am I somebody that you might like to have a reading with at some point in time? And it also gives you a chance to kind of pick my brain and get some information that maybe you wouldn't be able to get from your neighbor next door, because most of us don't have psychics for neighbors next door or mediums. And I know when I first started getting into this kind of work, I really didn't have a lot of friends that could relate to me or could talk to me about different things that were going on. So it was very helpful when I started meeting people that I could talk to and say, this happened and it kind of freaked me out, blah, blah, blah. And we could start talking about those things and sharing. And then, you know, we can always share stories back and forth. And that kind of eases some of the tension, just to know that you're not the only person out there like that. And that there's someone that is accessible that is also like that. You know, so that's part of why I'm here too, is I want people to have someone that they can talk to and ask questions of, because I think that's really important. So, still waiting for somebody to put up a question so I can answer it here. I hate dead air time, so you might hear me totally rambling while I wait for that. So anyway, what else should we talk about since my viewer is not putting up a question? I guess the next topic that we can cover would be picking out tarot cards. Let's say that you decide that you've seen enough tarot videos and you're kind of fascinated by the whole idea of people reading tarot cards, and you think, I wonder if I could do that. Maybe I would like to try that. So there are a few things that you should know before you go pick up your first tarot deck. The first thing that you should know is that a tarot deck kind of has a life of its own. It does have its own energy. Tarot decks were created to be used for divining purposes, so they are actually sacred tools, honestly. Um, and they do have, like I said, their own energy. So a lot of times when you get a tarot deck, that energy inside that deck is just excited that somebody is taking them home from the store or ordered them from Amazon and receiving them in the mailbox. They are thrilled. Those cards in that deck are thrilled because they're excited they're going to get to be used soon. That's their expectation. And so what happens a lot of times when somebody buys that first deck and brings it home, that deck is ready to talk. It wants to talk. And so many times people have insomnia after they buy their first deck. And they're very distracted during the day after they buy that first deck because that first deck is talking to them. That first deck is calling to them. I know that when I got my first deck, it was just calling to me all the time. It wouldn't let me sleep. It was trying to give me dreams in my sleep that weren't normal for me to have, trying to show me visions all the time. And at first, I really didn't know what was going on. That went on for 3 days for me before I got wise. And I remembered reading in this one book this line about the tarot that hadn't made sense to me at the time, but what I had read, the line said something about, and I don't remember the name of the book, I got it at the library, but it said something about don't let the tarot take over your life, or that the tarot would try to take over your life. And so I was like, wow, this deck really is trying to take over my life. It wants me to be playing with it all the time. And they say playing very loosely because really it's divining with it. But that was when I realized I had to set some boundaries with that deck. So I had to tell the deck back at that point I had a 40-hour job and I had to tell that deck, you know what? I need you to not talk to me while I'm working, not talk to me while I'm away from home. In fact, I set up a ritual so that the duck would know when I was ready to communicate with it. And I started doing that ritual every time before I read. And the deck was really good. Once it knew the boundaries, it was pretty good about sticking into those boundaries and talking to me when I wanted it to talk to me. It had really spent 3 days just doing whatever it felt like and being really excited. So I did have to kind of reinforce the boundaries for 2 or 3 days before it really got the picture good and solid. Okay, she's really not talking to us while she's at work. So that's something that you should know before you get a tarot deck is that you're probably going to have to set boundaries with it about when you can work with it and when it can communicate with you. And I know for those of you who don't have a tarot deck, that sounds kind of crazy. All I can tell you is wait until you get the deck. After you've had the deck a week, come back to me and tell me, is that crazy or not? All right, so that's like probably the first most important thing to know about your tarot deck whenever you get the first one. Let's see, I guess we can talk about how to select a tarot deck. A lot of people live in places where you can actually go to stores. Even Barnes& and Noble has tarot decks where you can go to a store and you can see a deck, touch the package, and sort of get a feel for the deck. But not everybody does. Some people don't have stores like that anywhere near them, and so they have to select a deck online. So there's a couple of different ways of choosing a deck. If you need to, if you're able to choose a deck in person, that's always better. And you want to go to a place that has the largest selection possible. And what I do when I'm choosing a deck is I will see what calls to me, what has the imagery that I'm really drawn to, what has the packaging that I'm really drawn to, because many times the packaging will be similar to the artwork on the card, or at least on the back side of the card. And so I just see what really kind of pulls me in as I'm looking on the shelf. And I may end up with like 8 or 10 different tarot decks in my arms before I'm done looking through. And all of these will be decks that will have called to me. There will be something about them that I'm really attracted to. And typically, I only buy one deck. And the reason I only buy one deck is because I believe it's much easier to learn one deck at a time because each deck is going to be a little bit different, even though they're all generally based on the Rider Waite. So what I'll do is once I've got my decks, my selection down to like 8 or 10, and you may not have that many that call to you. You may have 3 or 4, you may have 1 or 2, whatever. But once you get your selection down of the ones that are calling to you, then you want to find a nice quiet spot in the store and sort of lay everything out and kind of look at it and kind of narrow things out. And then as you have some that are calling to you more strongly than others and others that are less strongly, you want to start kind of sorting piles. Okay, this one isn't calling as strongly as the rest of them. It's going to go over here for maybe another time. This one's calling me really strongly. I'm going to set it here for maybe today and just kind of keep going through that way until you eliminate down to where you can with the decks that you brought over. The next thing that you want to do is you want to take your hand and you want to actually hold your hand over the deck, maybe about an inch over the deck, and you want to let yourself feel the energy that's coming off of that deck to you. And what you're actually feeling for is going to be heat, maybe. It may feel like kind of like static electricity, tingly type of feeling. It could be like cold, but what you're actually looking for is the most intense energy that comes from the deck, because whatever deck is putting out the most intense energy is going to be the best deck for you to go home with that day. Okay? So that's really how you end up picking the deck that you're going to use. And like I said, I only choose one deck at a time. I do know people who will come away with 2 or 3 decks. They just can't make up their mind. For me, I started out with one deck and I learned it very, very, very well. And then I bought my next deck. And I learned that I took 2 or 3 months to really learn that deck well. And then I bought my next deck. And so I always make sure I know my current decks really well before I move on to the next one. It's just the way that I do things. You don't have to do it that way, but it's what works for me. And you always want to do whatever works for you. So take whatever I'm telling you with a grain of salt and realize that you're going to have to tweak and make adjustments for yourself for what works for you. So anyway, that's how you would choose a deck if you got to go into the store to choose a deck. Now, if you can't do that, if you're choosing a deck and it's an online situation, then what you're going to do is you're going to go to the website where you want to buy your deck from, and you're going to look at the decks that they have available, the pictures of the decks that they have available. And what I would suggest doing, when I want to feel energy from something on the computer screen, I roll my cursor over that thing that I'm feeling the energy on. And where I feel the energy come through is actually through the mouse. I don't put my hand like above the mouse like I talked about earlier about the cards. I don't do that. I just hold the mouse normally, and as I have the cursor hovering over whatever it is I want to feel the energy about, I let that energy flow through the computer and into the mouse and then into my hand. So very much like you're feeling energy from the decks whenever you're in person, now you're feeling energy from these decks that are online. It's just that you have the mouse as kind of the middleman between you and the deck. So what you do is you just scroll over each deck that you think that you might like, that is calling to you, and you see which one has the strongest energy. And whichever one has the strongest energy coming through to you as you hover the mouse over it, then that's the perfect deck for you to buy for that day. So that's how you would choose a deck if you would buy online. All right, so I'm not quite sure how long I've been online, but I know it's been a little bit, and I haven't had any questions yet, which is so unusual. I'm used to people asking me questions. So there's all kinds of things that you guys can ask about. I really leave it open. You can question me about anything. You can ask me, Amista, why do you have so many freckles? But I really would like to answer some of you guys' questions. I would like for this to be guided by you guys so that I know that we're talking about stuff that's helpful for you. because that's really my point here. This is some free time that I'm giving up to try to be helpful to people that are out there that don't normally get the chance to talk to, the psychic girl next door. So whatever questions you have, I would feel much better if you would throw them out there. Quit thinking about it. Just type it in there. And I know you're thinking about it because I can feel it rattling around that you've got this tension. Should I type that question or shouldn't I? I don't know if she's going to want to answer that question. Only one way to find out. Only one way to find out. So welcome. I see we've got a new guest. How do you find out what your moon sign is? That's a great question. Thank you. That's an astrology question. But basically, there's a lot of different places online because astrology is not my specialty. But I do know this much. There are a lot of places online that you can plug in your information. Like you can plug in your name, you can plug in where you were when you were born. I think you have to know what city generally that you were in when you were born. And you want to know what time it was when you were born. Timing is very important. If you don't know what time, generally these things will look at you as being born either at midnight or at noon. But that's not going to give you a real accurate, solid idea about what your signs actually are, sun, moon, whatever. So what you want to do is look at your birth certificate because your birth certificate should say what time. At least I know the US ones do. And just plug that into some of these free chart generators. And they will actually usually give you a report that will tell you, this, what your sun sign is, what your moon sign is. And then some of them will give you signs for every single planet, like your Venus sign, your Neptune sign, all of those. Yeah, sun signs are a little bit more easy because the sun goes through each sign in about a month's time. But moon signs are different because the timing is different than for the sun. So that's going to be changing more frequently than a sun sign would. So the best thing to do is pop it into one of those little free birth chart and astrological reports for you. And there's plenty out there. All you have to do is Google them. I've done it a few times with a few different places. Because I always forget. I always forget. Like I know I'm a Scorpio. I know that my rising sign is Taurus. Right now I couldn't tell you what my moon sign is. I think it might be Scorpio too, but I'm not sure. So that's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking. Any other questions out there? I know that, that you guys have to have questions rolling around. And I'm here to answer what I can. If I don't know the answer, I'm just going to tell you straight up. How can you be positive that the angels are trying to connect? I don't know a way to know whether it's angels or not. I do know that you can be positive that whoever is trying to connect can stand in God's holy light. What I do for my psychic self-defense makes sure of that. But it has to do with psychic self-defense. You want to make sure before you really get started communicating with spirit on a conscious level that you're doing something to make sure you're well defended. Some people ask Archangel Michael to defend them. And then I have a whole little ritual that I go through that has become very fast for me with practice, but when it starts out, it's slow. And I go through that on the Meet Amista 1 video. It's like the last 10 minutes or so of that video. I go through that. So that's a good way. But basically, you have to do your psychic self-defense to make sure that nobody can come through to you with messages except those who can stand in God's light or those who have your highest and best interest in mind. So it's all about you have to set your space. You have to be the one in charge of who comes in and who doesn't. So that's how you can be sure. Does that answer your question for you? And that was a great, great, great question, by the way, Krista. That's exactly the types of questions that I like to have in here. So do we have any more questions? Ma. I love answering questions for people. I really want this to be helpful for whoever stops by to watch it. I want there to be good information in here. So that's why I like you guys to ask the questions, because then I know that information is going to be helpful for you. You're quite welcome, quite welcome. And there is a delay, guys, so if it seems like I'm not answering your question at first, please remember that there's a delay from the time that I actually get to see your question to respond to it, and then by the time you actually hear me respond to it, and that delay is pretty fat. I think it's like about a minute delay. I might be wrong. It might not be quite that much, but it does seem pretty fat to me. So any other questions anybody would like to take a peek at? To pick my brain for? Not that I know everything. If I don't know it, I'll tell you. Anybody, anybody, anybody? Mm-hmm. If it gets too quiet in here, I'm just going to go ahead and shut down the live event. So if you want to ask a question, now is the time to do it, because I hate dead air time. I want to make sure I don't hang up on you guys before I see the question. I want to give you guys time to type it and for it to show up. So I'm going to give it a couple of more minutes here for you guys to ask questions before I take off. Oh, here's a question. Cool. Oh, it's not a question, but it's a wonderful comment. Thank you, Beth. I appreciate that. That's so kind of you to say. I'm always hoping that they're helpful. My agreement with Sacred Spirit is that whatever comes through has to be in the highest and best interest of the people listening. So sometimes even when things sound negative, I'm always hoping that the people listening can turn those into a positive and use that kind of heads up to either change the energy or to be ready for it as it comes around. What's the difference between a professional reader and me? I don't know. I consider myself a professional reader. I am answering spiritual related questions, or I'm answering questions about recipes for cornbread or anything in between. I'm not actually doing any reading at these live events. This is really more for questions about like how do things work, or really anything else. It's really a chance just to kind of get to know me, but I'm not actually reading here. Willow Lake, hello, hello. Okay, so this is a great set of questions, Willow Lake. You've been looking for signs that your husband is around you, and I know your husband has crossed over. How do you know that it's really him or something else? Actually, that's very easy, Willow. If you have some things happening that you feel like, wow, that's him. I know that's him. Guess what? It is. That's your intuition talking to you, and maybe you're not used to using your intuition, or maybe you're not used to trusting your intuition, but you can trust it. So if you're getting your intuition that's telling you, oh, that's him, he set that up for you, then that's him. So that's really how you tell. It's pretty easy, actually. And as far as anything you can do to have him come around you, you can just ask him. The thing about spirits when they cross over is we can't see them. We can't look at them as we're talking to them, usually, unless you're clairvoyant. But we can still talk to them and they can still hear us. And so we can actually talk to them audibly, like we can say something out loud. Like, say, for instance, if your husband's name was Steve, which I don't know what his name was, but say that you want to say, Steve, I'm really thinking about selling the house and I would like to know what you think about it. Then you're going to have an answer come back to you. And the answer could be, if you're clairaudient, the answer could come back that you're actually like hearing words in your head. The answer could come back that he gives you some type of sign so that you know, like maybe there's something that's moved around in the garage that you know that would be a good idea message, or it might be a no, stay here message. So there's spirit, if you, spirit can hear us anytime we talk to him. Now, You don't even have to talk out loud. You can think to them too. That's what I say. You can think to spirit. So if you have a thought that you would like to say to spirit, you can think that to them and they can hear those thoughts too. And they can answer those thoughts just as easily as they can answer anything that you say out loud to them. So if you want him around, all you have to say is, I would really like for you to be around, during this. Maybe you have a special event that you would like him to be with you. Maybe you're going to the doctor for a mammogram or something and you want him to be there. Then you just ask him, because he'll hear you. So that's the best way to do that. What are some ways to open your heart to messages? First of all, Beth, the thing is, oh, cool, Raven, thank you. So, ways to open your heart to messages. First of all, it's not just about your heart, it also is about your mind. When I was first reading and researching, because I didn't know if I was crazy or if there really was spiritual communication going on, one of the things that I read said that psychic work is logic as your foundation with spiritual built onto it. So you can't tune your head out whenever you're doing spiritual work. So really getting your head and your spirit in line, because they have to be in line to communicate. So a lot of people, there's a difference between spirit and heart, okay? And a lot of people get it confused because we can get messages from our heart. We can get very emotional messages that don't necessarily line up with our head. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But those are emotions, and they're more coming from our mind or from our soul. Where spiritual messages are a little bit different. They're a little bit more, I don't really want to say disconnected, but I guess it depends what spirit you're working with. If you're working with your higher self, it's going to be more connected. But if you're working with someone else's spirit, then they're working with your own soul. So, you get messages from your heart through emotions, but you get messages through spirit by being open to the idea that you would like to hear from spirit, and by letting spirit know you would like to hear from spirit, that you would like that influence, that guidance, that advice. And really, it's a conscious decision, and it's consciously saying to spirit, I am open to this. Please send this my way. After you do that, then what you're going to notice is you do start to get in messages, and at first you're going to be like, was that or wasn't it? Because it's new to you. And then the more messages you get in and the more things you start to notice and pay attention to, the better you're going to get at recognizing those messages and knowing, oh, okay, that's really where the practice comes in. The practice comes in recognizing the messages and translating the messages to know what they mean. I'm sure some of those things are happening, definitely. And when you're feeling that it's him, it's definitely him. So, Beth, I didn't exactly answer your question just exactly the way you put it out there, but I hope that you understand what I was trying to convey. What else, ladies? What else would you like to know? You guys keep me busy talking. Okay, cool. Thank you, Beth. Yeah, it's kind of confusing because people do talk about, things that are on your heart and things coming from your heart, but intuition is a little different than that. It's a different level. To me, intuition, when people say that intuition is like a gut feeling, that is more for me like a gut feeling, but also I'm very clairaudient. So a lot of times I hear things. I'm a little clairvoyant, so sometimes I see visions. Um, so there's the psychic abilities really come in all the senses. I answered your second question before you even asked it. That's the way this stuff works. So what else, guys? I think I'm going to stay here a few more minutes and then I'm going to take off. Probably till mm, maybe about 7 more minutes, as long as you guys can keep me up with something to talk about. I don't like quiet time in here. And for those of you who came in later, if you want to scroll back to the beginning, I talk a little bit about psychic self-defense. And I also, if you're interested, I talk about choosing your first tarot deck too. So if you're interested in those things, there's some good information there. Yes, Willow Lake, I am. In fact, how I got started and realized that I had psychic abilities. Well, let me give you a little background. I grew up a good Catholic girl, and I was taught that to go to a psychic meant you would go straight to hell, do not pass go, do not collect $200, straight into the fire and brimstone. So when it became apparent that I might actually be using some psychic abilities, it really freaked me out. I mean, I thought, wow, where did I make a deal with the devil and I didn't realize it? I spent 2 weeks really dealing with that. So that's kind of the background. But how I found out that I had psychic abilities was that I had a significant other back a few years, like 4 years ago, that kicked the bucket on me. Um, it still kind of pisses me off that he left. But about 4 hours after he passed away, I started hearing him talk to me. Like I said, I'm strongly clairaudient, so I hear things a lot. So I really, at that point, because of how I'd been raised to not believe in psychic stuff or mediumship, anything like that, I didn't know what was going on. I honestly thought I was crazy. And when it kept going on, I did start doing some research into ESP and the idea, well, maybe there really is some communication happening here. But it took me really 5 months to figure out that there really was communication going on and I wasn't just destined for a padded room. So yes, the short answer is yes, I can talk to loved ones and I do talk to loved ones actually quite often. Now that's a good question, Raven. I don't really know. I don't know if August is like just a horrible month for all signs or not. I'm not actually an astrologer. I just read the tarot for each sign because I know that each sign falls under similar energy, and that gives me a better chance of being accurate for more people than if I would just put out like one weekly reading for every sign each week. But I'm only interested in astrology at like a hobbyist level. There's so much information you have to know for astrology that it's really, it's a big time education commitment to get in there, and I'm not interested in pursuing it to that degree. Have a great night, Beth. Thank you for stopping by and hanging out. Peace out. Cool, cool, Krista. Were you raised similar to me? Don't do it. It's funny because the very first time I did a reading, I had never had a reading from a psychic. So the first time I did a reading was at a spiritual circle where people sat around and practiced their abilities in a very conscious way. And I actually went there to test myself to see if I was crazy or if I was psychic. And I figured if I read somebody and I got information that was all solid that I was psychic, and if I got a whack, reading on somebody, then I would know that I was crazy. And it was really weird because everything that I said was 100% verified. I almost fell out of my chair. And so my first reading I did after that, I thought, well, I'm going to practice this on somebody else and see what happens. So I had a good friend at work that I read for, and she, I didn't know her, like I knew her from work, but I didn't know a lot of her background or her history because it wasn't like we had a lot of time to really talk at work. And whenever we did the reading, I had seen before the reading started a vision of a scar that was turned out to be on her leg. When I saw this vision, it was shown on a little girl's leg, like a 5 or 6 year old little girl's leg. And I didn't know if it would be like her or her daughter because she had a young daughter. And so I told her about this vision that I saw, and her eyes just got huge. Now, she had been to a psychic before. I had never been to a psychic. And so her eyes got really huge, and she says, "Can I show you something?" And I had told her that the scar was on the left leg. She starts yanking the pants leg up off of her left leg as fast as she possibly can and shows me right behind her knee, which was where the scar showed up in the vision. She had a scar exactly like what I had seen in my vision, only it was from when she was a little girl, and it was more healed up than what it had been in my vision. It was more of a fresh scar when I had seen it in the vision. So stuff like that just started happening, and that's how I actually got started. You love to watch us crack the cards? It's always fun cracking the cards. You never know what you're going to see. I have had one time where I cracked the cards like in a public place where there was a lot of people around, and I just was giving everybody one free card. And I was kind of wishing that I hadn't done this for this one lady because it was very, very intense. The message that I got for her was basically she was being molested and abused by several family members in a sexual way. And the message was that she needed to go outside the family to get help, that nobody in the family was going to help her. And that was a really hard one to deliver. And I asked her if she was sure she wanted that message in public because it was intensely personal. And she said she did. And I know Spirit wouldn't have brought it through if she didn't need to hear it. But it was really a hard message to pass along. Aw, thank you, Willow. Thank you, thank you. So let's see. Anything else? I'll do one more question if we get one more question in here pretty quick. Well, I'm waiting to see if one more question pops up. We're going to do a card of the day for everybody in the room. So this should be something that applies to everyone in here, one way or another. Let's see what we got. All right. What did we get? Ooh, this is a good card. We got a good card, guys. Ladies. Okay, so what we got is the Two of Cups. This is out of my Shadowscapes Tarot deck. I call her Lavender. That's what I've named my deck. Now, the Two of Cups talks about being really attracted to something and the attraction being mutual. So this can be another person. This can be talking about a relationship going very well, or this can be talking about a hobby or a project that you're very excited about also going very well. And so this is a card of the day. So this is going to be a very current situation. You should recognize it from within the past 24 hours or even right now, all the way up through possibly the next 24 hours if you haven't already seen it manifest in your life. That's what you were waiting for, huh, Raven? Okay, so on that note, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and log off. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for hanging out with me and for asking me questions. Peace out, everybody.